or the event page, either way, the Facebook event page.
We should be live now.
We're live. Hello. We're live. Hi, everyone. We'll give it a few more minutes to make everyone settled in. So excited. Yay. It's 12 o'clock, so for folks who are already here, kudos for being on time. We'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll start because we want to hear all about everything. We're going to hear everything about what Lorena has to share. So, yay. And my apologies ahead. I live right by the train station, so there might be some traffic. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start. We are recording this, so if you missed out on any part, you can always go back. So let's get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our Silicon Valley chapters event. I'm really excited about today because not only it's our first virtual event, but we also have a very special guest speaker who I had the privilege to meet before the event. And for me, it was incredibly healing just to be in the presence of someone who is willing to share their stories around adversity, especially at a time like this. So I got all the feels. So knowing that, you know, how meaningful this today event can be, I'm really glad you're able to make the time to be here. Thanks. Next slide, please. So first thing first, here's our agenda. We're going to talk about our organization and give you a little update. Then we'll jump into today's event, basically listening to Lorena, chat with Lorena, Q&A with Lorena, and then a quick wrap up for future announcements. Next slide, please. So to start, here's a super cute picture of us, the leadership team of the Silicon Valley chapter. Kiara, our chapter manager, she's currently working in the back end to make sure all the technical details are sorted out. Thank you very much. My name is Laura. My job is to keep up with the social media as much as possible for all the events. Magdalena handles our membership related work. Samantha handles the events logistics, and Winnie is our in-house mentoring expert. I do want to take a moment to really advertise for our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page that is in need of your attention and love. So please check it out when you have a second. And you can contact any of us via sv.chapter@womeninlocalization.com at any time. Next slide, please. I know we just started, but I'm getting more nervous. Being part of the Women in Localization organization, it means that we focus on having our events align with the mission statement that's laid out here to foster a global community for the advancement of women and the localization industry. And I think the keyword here today is the global community. So I'm really excited for the event. Next slide, please. So how do we do it? We host networking events, we offer mentoring program, we celebrate and acknowledge our accomplishments. There's a lot of things we do. You can learn a lot more about it in our website and our social media channels. Next slide, please. But the most important part is joining as a member. So who can join or how can you join? Here's a link for it. For those of you who are not a member yet, please join us. For those who are already a member but haven't signed up through this link, please make sure you re-sign up since we are centralizing the membership process, and this way we make sure we don't lose you. Next slide, please. And if you're still not convinced to join yet for whatever reason, here are some colorful benefits to help you decide. I personally joined Women in Localization about 5 years ago, and I can tell you that anything I do related to localization this organization has resources for it. So I strongly recommend joining and taking advantage of these wonderful benefits. And the next slide, and that's the last slide for me, I promise, before we start the main event. As you've already seen from our Eventbrite, Meetup, and Facebook content, I wanted to talk about a little bit about today's event. Our industry, the localization industry, like many others, are no exception to the impact by COVID-19. So we wanted to focus on lifting up by hearing the inspiring story from someone who faced adversity multiple times in her life. So I'm going to hand off to Samantha to introduce our guest speaker. For those of you who are watching, please share your stories in the Facebook page and any questions you might have so we can cover it later. Thank you. Samantha?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and thank you all for making the time to sit with us. So yeah, I'd love to take over and introduce Lorena. For us, it's a privilege to have guest speaker today. And I'd like to start by giving you, Lorena, a warm welcome to our Silicon Valley chapter. So thank you again, thank you to you for your time to join us and allowing us to listen to your story. So Lorena is a distinguished professional translator and interpreter. She has a master's from the Monterey, now Middlebury Institute of International Studies, and is a successful business owner. She owns her own interpreting agency, and she does the work that she loves. She's in the industry that we're all in, which is the localization industry, and she has a very interesting background, which we're going to hear more about today. Born in Ecuador, raised predominantly in Mexico, Spain, and Southern California. Lorena has traveled extensively throughout her career and lived in France and Argentina. Lorena has actually, as part of her interpreting career, been involved in a multitude of different assignments and roles, ranging from the Department of State interpreter, and has branched out into both medical, legal fields and more. Lorena's journey has been one where there have been obstacles to overcome, both professionally and personally, and has been has had to make key decisions during her journey, and the part of her decision-making process and the way that she's been able to overcome these obstacles is what we're very interested and exciting about sharing today. So the stories of overcoming adversity are the topic for discussion here, and we're really excited about giving you the opportunity to inspire our group as we seek pathways through these challenging times. So Lorena, great to meet with you. Do you want to start with telling us a bit about your background and decision to choose a career in localization, if we start right back down to your roots in the industry?
Well, sure, Kiara. First of all, thank you so much to you and to Women in Localization for this invitation to speak to you and your members and anybody else who's listening out there. It's really an honor for me to be able to share my story and to hopefully, impart some sort of experience, wisdom, lessons that I learned that everybody else can perhaps take little bits and pieces of and apply to not only their personal lives, but also their professional lives. So thanks again for inviting me. As you said, yes, I grew up in a bunch of different countries, and I ended up developing a knack for picking up languages. I have a really good ear. I played the piano until I was about 16, until soccer took over as my primary love, and took over as the thing that I dedicated a lot of time to thereafter. I studied Spanish, French, and Portuguese in college, and in my senior year, discovered at a career fair the Monterey Institute. And I thought, wow, that would be really cool to be a translator. But I ended up getting married right out of college to Martin, my husband of 35 years. And we bounced around for about 5 years in France, and I was pursuing a PhD in linguistics. And then he got a job in Carmel Valley, and that was my chance. I convinced him that getting a master's in translation was a really good idea. He wasn't so sure, just because, back then dropping $15,000 on a year on an education seemed like a lot of money for a young couple earning cook's wages, but it really turned out to be a great investment. And back then at the Monterey Institute, I don't know what it's like now, but we had to take both translation and interpretation in the first year. I was just interested in translation, hadn't really known much about interpreting other than from an aunt who was a court interpreter, and she wasn't super, supportive of going that route. But once I started learning about conference interpreting, I was hooked, and I thought it was just great. So after I graduated, my first job was working for the State Department. I happened to accompany a couple of labor union representatives from Spain across 5 states for a month. And in between, you have to fill your schedule in with translation and other kinds of interpreting. So I started interpreting in the local superior courts around Monterey and San Benito, until word came down that Monterey Institute grads had to get a credential or certification, rather, just like every other court interpreter. And so at that point, I decided that I would get a certification for an administrative hearing interpreter, because I had also had some experience in workers' compensation. And I felt like that was just much more interesting and lucrative than sitting in a courthouse all day. And, the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our members, particularly here in the Silicon Valley, can relate to that story around, getting out of school and figuring out which pathway to go. And the interpretation translator route is something that I know many of our members want to pursue, as well as the localization management side of things that I know Monterey Institute also offers. So that's a great starting point. So I know you mentioned meeting your husband, and so I think and part of that is figuring out how to balance family, career, and it's a challenge that many women can relate to. How hard was this for you, and did you have to make any difficult decisions or compromises in order to continue pursuing your career in interpretation?
Yeah, right. Well, I think for women especially, balancing family and career can be very challenging, especially here in the US, where not only are we expected to work and have a career, but also do the cooking, the cleaning, raising the kids, that whole thing. Fortunately for me, my husband's a chef. He liked cooking, and he's a very nurturing person. And so I did get some help, at least in that department, even though for the first 15 years of our marriage, I was what I consider myself to be a kitchen widow, because he would work, nights, weekends, holidays. That's the life of a restaurateur. But anyway, that's for another time. One of the most difficult decisions that I had to make early on in my career was when I started a family, because I thought that I could continue pursuing my career in conference interpreting by taking my firstborn, Leo, on the road with me. But that didn't work out so well. He was quite unhappy with it. And my husband, who is a very nurturing and empathic soul, also didn't really like the idea of, us being gone on the road. So the tough decision for me was to stay close to home, which meant giving up my dream to do high level, diplomatic interpreting and whatnot, and settling for interpreting in the community setting, which I felt at the time I was overqualified for. But, I quickly learned that interpreting is interpreting. And the gift that I had to, help in meaningful language access was just as important on a community level with injured workers, with medical people who are injured, people who have medical issues, judges, lawyers, etc. And so I think I was able to embrace that situation, focus on the fact that being a mother brought me great joy, and that I was really actually quite lucky to be able to split my time being a mother, but also keeping my foot in the door as concerned my translation and interpreting abilities.
Yeah.
And that worked for me just because, my husband worked in the afternoons. I was able to work in the mornings and then hang out with the kids in the afternoons. And the funny thing about that challenge is that even though it was, a compromise at the beginning, it really actually turned out to be an opportunity to do something I would have never dreamed of doing before, which is to become an entrepreneur. It actually opened up that door to start a business and support my family. And I don't think I would have, had that had I hadn't crossed that threshold to want to, put my family first, my children first, above my career. So you never know when a compromise on your own, may have something really beautiful to offer for other people, not just your family, but your community as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think turning a compromise into an opportunity is definitely something I think that many people can try to learn from and implement, or at least try to think about how they might be able to overcome adversity in that way. So yeah, I think going into the next sort of topic, which I think is probably the most prevalent topic right now, is COVID-19 and how this is impacting many people, not just professionally, personally, in other ways that maybe we didn't even think possible at the start of this situation. So can you tell us a little bit about how COVID is affecting your current work life? And also, how does it compare to other setbacks that maybe you have had in your personal, professional time, and how you kind of overcoming and dealing with both of these things?
Yes, sure. Yes, COVID, this pandemic has just been really difficult for all of us, hasn't it? It's affected my work currently because we're probably down about 80%. Most of what we do is interpreting. We have seen an uptick in the translation side, so that's been good, but it's definitely been devastating for face-to-face interpreting, which is what our company provides primarily. Staying at home is also a big, challenge for a lot of people, and not so much for me, the whole shelter in place thing, because, well, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, I've had to do that a couple of times in my life for, a good 9 months at a time. And that brings me to talking about my biggest setback, which I faced, and that has been health related. I actually had breast cancer twice. Once, the first time was about 12 years ago in Argentina, and then it came back in 2012. So currently I'm in remission. I'm about 18 months in now, so not to worry. But both times were really difficult, as people can imagine, because cancer is no fun. I had a full mastectomy, and that's disfiguring. It's sad. You lose a cherished part of your body. I think I mentioned loving to be home with my kids, and I was kind of an earth mother, and I nursed both of them for about 3 years each. So I have some pretty sweet memories around my breast, right? But chemotherapy is awful. It's debilitating. It's very isolating. It's the treatment that requires that you do shelter in place, just like right now, because when your immune system is so low, if you go out to a public place, to a gym, to the movies, to a supermarket, you can catch something and it could do you in. Obviously, you lose your hair on your head and your eyelashes and your eyebrows, and not looking all your best anyway. So going out was not super fun. And back then we didn't really have, this sort of platforms, right, to really communicate and see each other and all of that. So that was kind of tough. Add to that the fact that the first time I got breast cancer, we were living in Buenos Aires. So my whole family was, in the States. And I had, the challenge of running my business from there. And we had been there for about a year before I received my diagnosis. And during that year, even though I was running my business from abroad, I was in constant contact with my clients, with my colleagues, with the people who were doing the work with us. And I would speak to them, on a daily basis or weekly basis. And I was traveling every quarter, more or less, just to make sure everything was, running smoothly. However, I knew that that was not going to be possible in the months ahead with treatment, on the horizon. And I was just trying to figure out what the best way would be to handle that. I knew I couldn't keep it a secret because people were going to start to wonder where I was. But it was tough because I was afraid. I was afraid that my clients would leave me, that my colleagues would stop sending me work, or that, they would think that, well, you have cancer, you're going to die. So I may as well find somebody else to work with. And so that was very frightening and tough. So I didn't know what to do. But then, I remembered something that my dad used to tell me around honesty. My dad has always said that honesty is like pregnancy. You either are or you're not. And so eventually I just decided to muster up the courage and tell my clients and my colleagues what was happening. And, honestly, to my surprise, I knew I had friends and I was loved, but the amount of support and respect and love that comes from people who you don't even know feel that way about you was just awe-inspiring. It was very, very overwhelming, but it gave me the inspiration that I really needed to lift myself up in those moments when I was feeling super down and really sick, and to be able to look over to the horizon. So where I had, the vision of health and the vision of me getting back into my profession and into interpreting, into translation. I love to interpret, I love to help people. And so that really kept me going. And then, 4 years later, I didn't even make it to 5 years remission, but 4 years later, it came back. And it was a much more aggressive type of cancer. So the treatment was even more brutal. And I had to add radiation to it before I just had chemotherapy. But, I had already done it. And even though I was really upset that it had come back because I felt like I was doing all the right things to keep it away, I knew what was in store for me. As challenging as that was, unfortunately, at the same time, my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so you can imagine my poor husband, he had to go a year practically with his wife and his mother, who actually, she died the day after my last radiation treatment took place. So it was a really, really tough time. But again, my clients, my colleagues, the LEPs that we work with, that we serve, all of the people, the secretaries, the lawyers, the doctors, the judges, everybody that I work with just were such a tremendous support through that time. And I think being honest about it and just sharing, realities and vulnerabilities is a very important thing to do. To help people tap into their compassion.
Yeah. I think that's such an inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I'm sure, I think for us as a women in localization group, we all have something to learn from, the types of challenge that people can face. Personally, how that impacts our professional career, or how we can manage and actually have control over whether we let it impact our professional career or not, and what support structure we have around us to share. And I think part of what we want here as part of our chapter, and in terms of like the whole network itself, is to be a support structure for people in adversity or whatever type of situation they find themselves. So yeah, I think that's really just an immense obstacle that you've overcome, and that we will continue to be part of your life, right? So I think, relating it to the current circumstances, and not trivially, obviously, but just trying to think about, like, what lessons do you feel then have you learned that maybe other people can apply in the case of, they might be, losing their job, they may have, caring for a family member, or trying to get their kids through school right now, or even just trying to find a way to balance their career, their work in localization, and managing other things in the background, like people may have rent to pay. Like what sort of skills do you think, or beliefs do you think would really help us here as a community to try to cope with this current situation?
I think that relying on your family, on your friends, everybody has a different, situation, but some people have mentors or really close colleagues. For me, it was mostly family and friends and colleagues. I have a great group of women soccer players from 40 years back, but when we all turned 40, we got together and started playing on a national level. And so they were a super huge support for me, because I'd been connected with them for 20 years, but then we came back together yearly for these national tournaments, and they were just great support to have. My mom, who is probably listening right now, I didn't really know this about her at the time, but she was terrified of flying. And we'd been in Argentina for a year. We'd invited my parents to come visit us, and they kept putting it off. And then I discovered what the real reason. But, she took her Valium and she got on the plane and she came down to Buenos Aires for my surgery. And they were down there, my parents, tremendous support, just tremendous love and support for about a month. Same thing while I had cancer the second time around up here in Santa Barbara. They would come up on a Thursday and hang out, through a Saturday to just help around the house and help my husband with the cooking and caring for me. And, that was just, there are no words for that. Obviously, everybody has a different situation, I know, but if your partner is there, Martin was a rock for me both times. And my children were so supportive. In fact, my older son, Leo, he shaved his head. Wow. When I had to shave my head in solidarity. So that was great. And, even my clients, one of my oldest and best clients, when he found out that I had breast cancer, and he's not a hugely talkative guy, but he would call me like every 2 weeks. I get a phone call. Hey, how's it going? What are you doing? This is what's going on over here. Just chit chat, nothing heavy or anything like that. And so I think tapping into people around you who love you and support you, even though in these times it's so crazy, we don't see each other enough, we don't talk to each other enough, but just knowing that they're there for you, turn to them, because that's your support.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important for us all to remember, is that, sometimes the support can come in surprising ways, and don't make assumptions that someone won't understand or won't listen. And if we surround ourselves with the right people, then people can surprise you. And I think in this time, as much as any, people have learned that not everyone's in the same boat, and everyone's got different circumstances. And I think we are being a lot more sort of patient and tolerant and understanding of different situations. So I think I think we've got some more questions here, just around, each other up in this specific environment. So with the pandemic and people being confined to their houses, and maybe having less of that human touch available for people maybe who live alone, are there any other sort of techniques or ways that people can find mindfulness or comfort even when they're not around other people?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think super important, and one of the things that my journey with cancer has taught me is that, we're not in control of what happens to us, or we're not in control of what other people do. We're only in control of the way we respond to the things that happen to us around us. And so I think, taking things one step at a time when facing monumental changes in our life, like right now with this COVID pandemic, it can be very helpful, because if you just look at something, it can be so daunting to see it all as a big whole, right? In entirety. But having short-term goals, things that you can work towards to feel like you're progressing, with us in our localization space. It could be learning that, I don't know, cat tool that you've been wanting to learn for a while, or in interpreting, trying out remote simultaneous interpreting, you finally have time, some downtime to kind of play with those things. And I think all of that kind of helps us get closer to that light at the end of the tunnel. And the way I approach, huge challenges like this now is, remember that game that maybe some of you are too young to know it, but it's called Pick Up Sticks. And it's basically a bunch of sticks, and you throw it on the ground, and then you're supposed to just pick each stick up very carefully without moving the next one, right? And life is like that sometimes. It's just like picking up sticks, mate.
Yeah.
As one of my Australian friends used to say, just one thing at a time. And if you do that, it reduces that anxiety and that stress that having this huge daunting problem in front of you creates. And it also, allows you to be in the moment. And there's really something to be said for embracing moments of suffering, of challenge, of isolation, knowing that, this too shall pass. We're not always going to be confined this way, right? And having that understanding, I think, can really be helpful in helping people cope with difficult situations.
Yeah, I think that's a really key message as well, is like taking each day at a time. I know that I've heard that a lot of people are doing that because, we don't have necessarily this end date, because the shelter in place just keeps getting pushed out. And so I've seen people say, it's not so much about a target date anymore. It's just like, what can we do in the here and now to keep things moving for ourselves? And like you say, live in the moment, enjoy, and maybe just look around and see, okay, who do we have around us, especially those who are sheltering in place with other people. So I think the horizon is a good thing to talk about. I think that does feel quite a positive outlet for all of this. Do you see something either for us as women, or for the industry, or just based on your own insights, what potential positive outcomes could we be looking to embrace as we emerge from this in this current environment?
Well, let's see, positive outcomes. I mean, gosh, there are so many I've already seen currently, just in the short time that we've been sheltering in. Something really beautiful, which is families reconnecting. Fortunately, I live out in Santa Barbara, Goleta actually, and right behind my house is a bike path that you could jump on and go for like 8 miles uninterrupted. And I can't tell you how many families I've seen, in dads with their small children, moms, all families together out riding their bikes or on their scooters or just walking, picking daisies and whatnot. And I just think that's so beautiful, because in our hurried times and with all the screens, you know, that are all around us, I think people haven't had that chance to really connect with one another. And I think that has been a really positive outcome from this terrible pandemic. I also live about a 12-minute walk from the beach, and it's the same thing. I just love seeing, you know, dads on their surfboards with their little, I mean, I'm talking, you know, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and getting them on those surfboards where they probably wouldn't be doing that, you know, currently. And another, I think, thing that might be positive out of this, because I'm seeing it more and more, and it's something that I learned to do throughout my challenges, is people doing nice things for others and having the grace to accept those nice gestures. You know, when you're going through cancer, you can't imagine all the kinds of advice that you get. And people just want to help you. People just want to do something for you. And maybe it may not be the right thing for you, but it's the right thing for them. And if you take it with that spirit with which it was given, it can be so meaningful, right? Not only to yourself, but to them. And I think engaging in those kinds of exchanges right now throughout this pandemic is really important to strengthen those bonds that we have with our coworkers, with our bosses, with our clients, and hopefully emerge out of this current pandemic with positive feelings and positive outcomes for renewed relationships in business and in industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's good to feel like, you know, we have something ahead to look forward to, something that we can embrace as a positive potential, you know, opportunities that come out of this. So I think we can open it up to the audience questions now. And I will start to take a look at what we have submitted. Thank you everyone who has submitted a question so far. You can do that through our the Facebook page in the discussion tab on the event, and also in the comments on the Facebook page as well. So we'll take a quick look here. So some of those specifically about stress. So stress obviously can come through illness or, you know, other types of adversity, but obviously in the workload, mostly related to work-life balance. Do you have any sort of tips and tricks for coping with stress, particularly in this remote environment that we're working in?
Yeah. You know, when this first started, we were very proactive with our clients, and we sent them all a letter explaining that we're still here, we can still interpret, we have, you know, remote interpreting platforms that we can use, and we wanted to be a conduit for that. And it was really frustrating to see how ill-prepared people were in our industry. And that was a little bit stress producing because, you know, you're watching your workload go, you know, down, and you really kind of want to keep it up. I mean, we have, you know, people to pay and rent to pay and all that kind of stuff. And you can get pretty stressed out when those things happen. But again, when you just realize that everybody's struggling with this current situation that we're having, they're trying to figure it out. They're doing the best they can, even though you're providing them with all of this information. Embracing the fact that, you know, I can't control what they do. All I can control is how I respond to it. And if I choose not to get stressed out about it, I can express my displeasure or my frustration. But I think just going, okay, I'm putting it out there. I'm doing what I have to do. It'll come. Eventually it'll come. And to be honest, now we're in we're like in the 9th week or what have you. There has been a tiny uptick. And it's kind of funny because in what I do, I've had to interpret via FaceTime, video messenger, via WhatsApp messenger, with a phone, you know, the person on the speaker phone over here, when the physician's in their office, seeing them, but I can't see them, and it's really muffled. Yesterday, I had to interpret for a woman who was in the fields, and the sun was shining behind her, and I couldn't see her face. and she had a Bluetooth on, so I couldn't really hear what she was saying. And then when she finally took the Bluetooth off and put the phone to her mouth, I could hear her, but I couldn't see her. And I mean,
Wow.
I could get stressed out about that and get on my high horse about how, oh, this is not how it has to be and how it should be. But what are you going to do? People are doing the best that they can. So I think, embracing the moment and realizing that everybody's being challenged by it can maybe reduce those stress levels a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And I think that leads on to one of the next questions, which was around how have you adapted the interpretation side of your company to the current conditions? And is there a message and advice for anybody sort of logistic wise?
Yes, I've adapted by, like I said, trying to tap into the different platforms that exist. We have a friend who works for Zoom, and so she demoed that simultaneous interpretation feature that Zoom has. We've been trying to learn that and to use that and to help our colleagues use it as well. I've been fairly proactive in helping my colleagues understand about acoustic shock and to get the right headsets, right, and the right noise canceling booms, so that when we do our craft, we're very clear, people can hear us, we can hear. And then trying to offer other avenues to our clients, like over the phone interpreting, if they're not ready for video remote interpreting. Been doing a lot of over the phone stuff. And it's kind of funny because people, even though we have the Zoom account and we offer to set up the meeting, I'm finding that they don't want to do it because, especially the female attorneys, they don't want to have to put on their face and their makeup and get right. Because that's something that I'm enjoying being home, is being in jeans and a t-shirt. And it's obviously not as ideal because you can't see people's faces when you're interpreting, but it works. And I think you just gotta have to hodgepodge it all together and make it work somehow.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is testing our abilities to think creatively about sort of solutions and ways to engage with customers and employees as well. So another question. So some of the challenges you face, particularly when you've been in treatment and coming through the other side of your illness, how have you found it possible to get interested or focus back onto some of maybe the more mundane topics of the day-to-day when you've had to come through such adversity?
I think not dwelling on the past is very productive. And in fact, after the first time I went through breast cancer, and I started joining all these breast cancer groups, these support groups, and I was online as well as in person to these support groups. But I quickly learned that was not really helping me at all. I'm not the kind of person that likes to live in the past in that way. And I decided right then and there that, you know what, it's over. I did this. I'm just going to move forward. I'm going to live my life healthily. I did modify my diet. So eat healthier. I was always an athlete, so working out was part of my routine. And so that really always helps with stress levels, but just not even dealing with it, and that was very helpful until it came back. And when it came back, I was pretty angry. I mean, I was like, wait, what's going on here? Okay. I'm eating well, I'm eating organically, I'm exercising, I'm doing everything I should, and it comes back. What's up with that? Right. I wanted to run away to an ashram and let's see if, that would heal me, since chemotherapy didn't heal me. But that was the reality, and I had to deal with it and had to go through it again. And now that when was that? 2013. So now I'm 7 years away from that experience. Again, even though we're talking about it right now, and I don't mind talking about it, I don't think about it every day. I really don't. When my 9-month checkups come up and I have to get my labs done, I get a little nervous, like right around that time till I get the results. But otherwise, it's like, I want to be present. I want to be here. I want to be present for my family, for my friends, for my work. Because after all, this moment right here that we're all sharing is the only thing we have right now. What I said 5 minutes ago is gone.
Yeah.
And whatever I'm going to say in 5 minutes, or you're going to say, is not here yet. So we have to live, or I like to live in the present moment. And I think that's just so, it just brings a lot of peace and harmony into my life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really sound advice. I think it's definitely what I think, the whole concept of mindfulness that we think about even before this happened. I remember, everybody tried not to only control the things that you can, or worry about the things you can control, versus think too far ahead. But certainly I think some other questions that we have here are talking about, what's going to happen in the future. What do we think about, planning for maybe this to happen again? So as a business owner, as a community here, how could we potentially set ourselves up to, be able to cope with this kind of situation if we were to, this was going to be a regular cycle, for example, every year, or if we were to start thinking about this being maybe a new normal, God forbid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question, because, even though I just said living in the moment is really important, we do have to plan ahead. That's just a fact of life. And I think having those, short-term goals and systems in place for another epidemic, God forbid, or another outbreak, is important. In this whole pandemic, as it relates to the localization industry, I think we're probably going to come up with a lot of new standard operating procedures around localization, translation, interpreting. I know that in the interpreting space, it's been a huge shakeup for us because there's a faction of people who are really resistant to technology, whether it's in the form of artificial intelligence or neural, technology. And the truth is, this has taught us that we have to adapt if we want to keep earning a living and working and helping people, build those bridges. Or I think we have to embrace remote interpreting, whether it's simultaneous or consecutive, but that has to be part of our toolbox now. I know I don't have to tell this group, but about that famous quote, right? Bill Woods, I think, translators are not going to be replaced by technology. They'll be replaced by translators who don't know how to use the technology. And the same can be said for interpreters. So I think planning for those contingencies, keeping your remote platforms up and running, having your backup computers and your backup headsets is very important, because also emerging from this COVID pandemic, I do believe that we're going to see a hybridization in our profession. I think some people are going to realize, oh, okay, yeah, you can work from home, right? Or I don't have to drive 2 hours to San Luis Obispo for a 2-hour hearing. I could do it remotely, and the judges are going to be okay with that. And that's just going to promote more language access to more people. So it, instead of being a threat, I think it can be something really positive for our industry.
Yeah. And I think this is definitely the conversation that we're hearing amongst many businesses is, how does this change, our ratio of people working from home to demanding or requiring people to work in the office. And there are definitely, information security and other considerations that have to be taken into account. But this has been a forced situation for many businesses, and I think there is an adaptation step that's now underway as to, okay, well, this maybe not be a temporary change in our operating model, may have to be permanent, and then how do we navigate that change with our employees and our infrastructure?
Yeah. And I think that, that's very well said. And it kind of makes me think about, people who homeschool their children and how they get, 6 hours worth of schooling done in 2. Yeah. I think, as business owners looking at that as in terms of employees who have to come into the office, hey, if they get their work done and they're doing it from home, how nice is that for them, especially like for women, right? Who have young children or maybe parents that they have to care for or what have you. Working from home can actually be good for everybody, for the woman, for the employer, and for the families. And I think you know, adapting to that kind of a model can be really a win-win for everybody in terms of happiness and productivity too.
Yeah, yeah. I second that, sure. Okay, and then I think we've probably got time for one more question. And this has come from a couple of people. What are you working on these days, and what events do you have coming up planned for the future?
Oh, wow. Well, I've been working on AB5 for almost a year now. And that's been taking up pretty much all of my free time outside of interpreting and running the business. And, you know, being with my family, it's just been very consuming. For those who are listening who may not know, translators and interpreters do not have an exemption from this new law that requires employers to hire us as employees. And it's a big issue for our industry as a whole. I know that there are venues where there are interpreters and translators as employees, and that's great, and we love that. We just don't want this law to be imposed on people who like to be self-employed. And so we worked really hard to get a bill sponsored in the Senate, which unfortunately failed the day it was supposed to go to committee last week. And in fact, this morning, we as an industry supported a bill called AB 1850, which was authored by the author of AB5. That includes the words certified translator as being exempted under professional services. It's a great start, but as this audience knows, not everybody is certified because there aren't certifications for every possible language pair, nor vertical, right? Currently we have certifications. I think ATA certifies in 31 languages, and there are over 650 languages spoken in the States. And in terms of interpreting, there are only there are certifications available in legal and legal and medical. So that leaves out a whole swath of people who practice in other areas, like the schools, for example. But that bill just came up for hearing this morning, and it passed the Assembly Labor Committee. It's on its way to the Appropriations Committee. It wasn't amended to include interpreters, even though a few interpreters did call to ask for that to be amended and for the word certified to be stricken. So it's a work in progress, and I think I'm going to probably still be working on that, you know, until the fat lady sings, as it were. But we're also on the business side. We're tightening up our systems. We're implementing a scheduling system, and we're just really trying to support all of our colleagues to get back to work in a very safe way, whatever that looks like for us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's all of the questions that we've had today, and I think that's been a really immense 40-50 minutes of discussion and dialogue, and we're so thankful that you were able to join us, Lorena, and share your story. And I do hope for everybody watching and listening that you've been able to take some inspiration for this and apply it to your current situation. So thank you so much, Lorena.
No, thank you all of you great women in localization there in Silicon Valley. Yeah. Again, really an honor to be a part of this, and I look forward to the next speakers. I can't wait to hear more from the series because I think it's super important for all of us, especially at this time. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Lorena.
Okay.
Right, I'll hand back to Laura to wrap up our event today. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you again, Lorena. That was so good. I think the common theme that really resonated with me was when you're talking about people and adaptation, so both personally and professionally. There are just so many points that really hit to the core. So thank you again for all the stories. That was our very first, virtual event. This is our last slide to wrap up. We do have a survey set up to give us feedback. I know some of you had some trouble finding the link, but give us all the feedback you have. We'll make sure that we accommodate everything in the next future events. And most importantly, we are hiring. So join the team if you want. Find us on Facebook page, contact us. We are looking for volunteers to become part of our leadership team. And if you haven't seen our, super cute picture, you definitely want to join us. So let us know if you know anyone or if you want to be part of it, and be part of, helping organize events or mentoring and career growth opportunities. We'll be very, very interested. So let us know. The email is sv.chapter@womenandlocalization.com. And I think that leaves us 5 minutes a little bit early for the event, but I think we covered everything. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have stories that you want to share, please continue to share it in our Facebook event page. Show us some love there. We want to have more communications, and we want to have more stories, sharing around the community. So please participate, and we will get back to you for our next event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.